answering all those 5 dilemmas that Arjuna had.
Yes. Arjuna raised doubts in chapter 1. He said he gave 5 reasons for not fighting: just enjoyment, fear of sinful reactions, and then indecision, and Varna Shankara. And what is the other one? Anybody remember? Arjuna raised doubt. Enjoyment. So he gave these as a reasons and then said he can't fight with us. So chapter 2 is a summary. It's called as Gita Saramsha, or Gita summarized, like Prabhuji said. And Krishna did give the answer. So ideally, technically, everything should have been completed by chapter 2. But still, when chapter 3 started, it is called as Karma Yoga. And because Arjuna wasn't doubtful, because he heard a lot of information in chapter 2, and chapter 2, Krishna spoke about definitely you have to fight Arjuna. It is as a Kshatriya, you have to fight. Only if you don't fight, then you will incur sin. And then he also talked about Sthita Prajna, which is called Sthita Der Muni, where attack everything through Buddhi Yoga. So Arjuna was in dilemma. So chapter 3 dealt with that. And then chapter 4 is called as Jnana Yoga, where Krishna gave the knowledge of transcendence. Krishna revealed like why he comes, what is the real purpose, and he also revealed that he is avyayam, that is, he is unborn, and he is, if we are gaining some knowledge, then we have to make sure that we are gaining from the right source, right? So initial few verses of chapter 4 was that to give us a confidence, yes, whatever knowledge we are gaining, it is from the right source and from the right context. And then Krishna also spoke about you have to gain the transcendence and knowledge. Why only then, and then you will be fixed in transcendence, like Tadviti Pranipatena. How do we gain? By rendering service to a spiritual master and ask him submissively, ask questions submissively, and then try to gain the knowledge. So that's how the chapter 4 ended, and chapter 4 said, okay, now with the knowledge, slay down Arjuna. So again, chapter 5 is called as Karma Sannyasa Yoga. Okay, Karma Yoga with Krishna consciousness. Why again same dilemma Arjuna was having? Because chapter 4 again it concluded with the saying, with the knowledge try to slay down. So you mean to say that knowledge is more important? Then why are you asking me to fight? Arjuna asked this question, and then Krishna has to elaborately explain, no, if you don't do, then it is very important that you do your prescribed work. There is something called karma, akarma, and vikarma, where we saw these things. Karma is acting according to the scriptural rules. Vikarma is going against the scriptures, and akarma is doing your prescribed work, but with devotional mentality, so that you will not incur sin. And then chapter 5 concluded with the peace formula. What is the peace formula? Bhoktaram yajnatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhritam sarvabhutanam nyatvam nam shantim richati. So whatever you do, or whatever you sacrifices you do, whatever the tapasa you do, whatever the austerity which you do, always know that I am the bhokta. Okay, everything is finally going to come and rest on me. So have this knowledge. And so Krishna also briefly touched upon the concept of meditation in chapter 6, chapter 5, where he spoke about how one has to meditate, focus, and other things. So then the chapter 6 started with how does this yogi really meditate? And that's how the we saw about there are two, there is a yoga ladder, and we saw what is this Ashtanga Yoga. We saw this development. How does they develop? First, they start with Karma Kanda. Karma Kanda is nothing but working, fruitative worker who performs the rituals for elevation to the heavenly planets, regulated sense gratification in accordance with the scriptures. And then they progress to Karma Yoga, that is Nishkama Karma Yoga, that renouncing the fruits of one labor. We detailedly saw in chapter 3 and also chapter 5. And then Jnana Yoga, where renouncing and fruits, speculative knowledge about the Brahman, and also performing some austerity. And Ashtanga Yoga, this plus control of mind and senses, meditation on Paramatma. And Bhakti Yoga is loving devotional service to Supreme Lord. So this is how the progress. Where are we now trying to learn? This is Ashtanga Yoga. Like how they do this eightfold yoga. Ashta Anga Yoga. Ashta means 8. Anga means limb. Yoga is connection to the Supreme. So how do they really do? What is Krishna's definitions of this Ashtanga Yoga? We saw in many types of yoga which they prescribe, right? Nowadays, in modern day, there are so many kinds of yoga. So we saw that there is so many fancy names in the name of yoga. They are doing so many things. And see all these weird things. But according to Krishna, what is this Ashtanga Yoga all about? So, and then we briefly touched upon this. What did we saw? Ashtanga Yoga means, like we discussed, it is 8-limbed yoga. What are all the 8 limbs? Yama, which is external disciplines, Niyama, internal disciplines, Asana, posture, Pranayama, breath control, Pratyahara, withdrawal of senses, Dharana, concentration, Dhyana, meditative absorption, Samadhi, union and integration. So this is what that comprises of Ashtanga Yoga, not the fancy yoga which the modern day practices are doing. That maybe will help the body to stay fit and strong. But what is the real purpose of yoga? To connection with the Supreme Lord. So these are all the limbs. It's also progressive limbs. Okay. So these are the progressive limbs, and then finally, if once step by step, if they are able to progress, finally able to reach the Samadhi. Samadhi is only at that time they will be able to turn inwards and then see the Paramatma. So finally, it's like connection, right? They are trying to establish here. They are trying to establish connection only with the Paramatma. Ashtanga Yoga ends only with the connection to the Paramatma, and that's why Bhakti Yoga is much higher ladder where the devotee does a devotional service, loving devotional service, not just like any other thing, loving devotional service. So these are all the progressive stage. So moving forward, Krishna is going to explain about what is this niyama all, what is this 8 limbs is all about. So Emma means he should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. So mind control is very important. Why did we see mind control is very important? In the same chapter, when we saw last week, chapter 6, verse 5 and 6 talks about the control of the mind. Controlled mind is the friend. Uncontrolled mind is the enemy. We don't want to ever, nobody wants to live with an enemy, right? Because the mind takes oscillation, it takes any turns, and then one time it will chastise us, at the same time, and later then it will convince us and plead us to do some activity, even though which is not favorable for us in the growth. So it's very important we do a mind control. Okay. And what is it? Niyama is temperament in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation. Oh, okay. So niyama is external. How do we eat, sleep, work, and recreation? So yama is internal mind control, and niyama is how we are carrying forward our habits, just like the way Krishna talked about the Sthita Prajna in chapter 2. So we saw, right, how does the yogi who is Sthita Prajna, he move, carry forward himself, how does he associate, what is this? So it is like, it's very important. Why do we have to have a control? So that we are at peace. Only these are all the progressive steps. Only if we are able to control one by one, when we first this first 4, the yama, niyama, asana, and pranayama. These are all, the first four are the initial stages of yoga ladder. We saw in verse 1 to 2, like there are two, yoga ruksha and yoga ruda. Okay, yoga ruksha is when the devotees start to practice these principles in the initial stage. So that comprises of these four, because first we wanted to control externally. And this is very important. Only when we are able to control our external senses, then we will be able to turn inwards. If our senses are so agitated, then we can't focus inside. If we are so, say, we are restless, something happens, and we are so restless, we are in a confusion, at that time, can we sit calmly and then do something? No, it's highly impossible for any person. So first, we wanted to control the senses. And that's why these first four limbs are essential. Once we get control of it, then we go to the next step. Asana. Asana is, how does the yogi sit? How does yogi place himself when he is trying to do this meditation? What does he do? He lay kusa grass on the ground and then cover it with a deer skin. The seat should neither be too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. One should hold one's body, neck, head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me. Okay, somebody might think, okay, Krishna is trying to explain this only for person who is going to do Ashtanga Yoga. I am not going to do an Ashtanga Yoga. My inclination is all towards Bhakti Yoga. But Acharyas and senior devotees have deciphered the verse and the chapters in such a way that what they say is, whatever we have learned till now, first six chapters of Bhagavad Gita actually helps person to develop oneself in the sadhana bhakti. We saw, right? Tadviti pranipatena, we have to humbly and then submissively surrender to the supreme spiritual master. And also we saw about karma, we have to do, and we have to do our duty. And this talks about how do we have to sit, how do we have to practice. Okay, these are all the limbs of sadhana bhakti. Sadhana bhakti is one kind. There are two types of devotional service. One is sadhana bhakti, and as they grow, then it leads to bhav bhakti and prem bhakti. Okay, so either they can do Vaidhi sadhana bhakti or Raganuga sadhana bhakti. There are two types of sadhana bhakti. We will read when we go to the next level, which is in the Nectar of Devotion. It is explained in detail. But whatever it has been told, it's not that it is not related to us. And how can we relate this to a practitioner who is following the devotional path? Okay, he should be neither be seated too high or too low. Why they are talking about too high or too low? Say if he is situated in some mountain, then when he go and sits in the mountain, all he will be looking is the scenic view. Okay. So at that time, we don't want to engage the senses. The mere process of doing all this meditation for things is to control the senses, turn inwards, and then start meditating on the Supreme Lord, because Supreme Lord is in everyone's heart, right? So in order to do that, first we have to clear out certain path. So that's why they say this yogi can't sit in a too high, because if he sit in a too high, then he will be only viewing the scenic beauty. Not too low. Why not too low? Say if he is in a deep down, okay, and there can be many insects or some other creatures crawling, those he have to be worried about it. Or somebody can throw something from the top, so he has to be worried, oh, what is now going to fall on my head? He does not have to worry. So he has to stay in some secluded place, in a sacred place. Okay. And how it is related for us, for our devotional purpose. So we should also, when we are trying to do a chanting, we should also try to find a place that is suitable for us, so that it can enhance the focus. Not when the TV is going on, when something is going on. It is not that just because I want to finish my round, I can't just sit in front of TV, because though my mouth will be chanting, I will not be focusing at all. The eyes are very important. You know, when in scientific thing, they did a research. They say when the eyes are open, it tries to take a lot of energy because it tries to view so many things, and it will try to send the informations to the brain, and the brain will have to process. That's why in the night we try to close the eyes, and also during the meditation, if we close the eyes itself, we will be able to conserve a lot of energy within our body. So the eyes by itself will consume a lot of energy. Even if we have to take rest, even though we don't feel sleepy, sometimes we just close eyes and then sit and relax, right? That will actually conserve a lot of energy. There has been a research done on it. So we have to see where do we sit. We have to sit in a place where it is not too uncomfortable, or else it is if it is too uncomfortable, then we'll be only moving here and there, adjusting ourselves. Or if it is too comfortable, then we will doze off. We should also see to that. And one's body, neck, head, and it should be in a straight line position. So for a yogi, he can't be in slumped, because over a period of time, if he is slumped, and then it might hurt him back. Similarly, for a sadhaka, he has to make sure that it is being prescribed that sit in one place. Even Srila Prabhupada has prescribed that it is more beneficial if a sadhaka completes the 16 rounds at a stretch. If he is able to sit in one place and then finish it, it is more beneficial. Of course, there is no hard and fast rule, because Mahaprabhu said, Nam Akari Bahuda Tatrarpita Niyamita Kalan. So there is no hard and fast rule that you have to do like this. But the acharyas and devotees have said, if you are doing like this, it will be more beneficial, because we are not going to focus. Say, if I'm sitting in a closed room and then I'm chanting, all I can see is only the perimeter until the circumference of this closed room. Beyond that, my eyes can't see. So over a period of time, say after 2 rounds or 3 rounds, I know what is there in this room, and I can't think beyond it. So finally, it has to come back and then see, okay, what else can I do? Okay, let me see what I am repeating. So the mind will try to focus. So that's how the focus will increase. So that's what the Acharya says. And they have to sit it in a deer skin. Okay, so the yogi, they have been prescribed either they will take a tiger skin or a deer skin. Why this tiger skin? Because they are not going to see, this yogi is not going to kill the animal just for taking the skin. If there is already a dead animal, then they will take that skin and then use it as a mat and then sit on it. Why? Because there is a chance that when they are sitting, normally they go and do this in the forest, right? And in the forest, there can be many creatures, like snakes can come and hurt. But if it is a tiger skin or this skin, so the states will stay away. So just to keep themselves safe, so that they don't have to worry about what are all the animals or the creatures that is going to come. It's not that they are going to sit in their home and then do. They are leaving their family and then going out and then doing. So these are all some of the prescribed things what Krishna said, but we can easily relate these things to a sadhaka, how he can use these guiding principles to enhance his bhakti process. Anyway, we are taking time. One of the senior devotee was thinking, just think like that. Anyway, you are taking time. Why can't you focus on it? Yes, anyway, I know that I have to chant. Say, even if I'm chanting just 1 round, in my whole 24 hours, I'm dedicating the 10 minutes to chant 1 round, which means I'm taking away from my schedule. So in this case, why can't I focus? Just focus and get that done best. So that's what the senior devotee was suggesting us. So when we think about it, it really make logical sense, right? I'm anyway doing it. Why can't I do it much better so that I can get the benefit out of it? So, and then how does the yogi? They have to focus on the tip of the nose. Why it's tip of the nose? In the previous chapter, when he concluded chapter 5, in verse 27 and 28, Krishna said he has to focus on the eyebrows. And now he is saying tip of the nose. Why he is contradicting? It is not contradicting. So here, Krishna is saying we have to have some focus point, correct? So whatever that best it can be, because if we start focusing on this Beyond it, the mind cannot go any further. There should be some focus. But what does the sadhaka do? He will focus on Krishna. He will try to hear what he is chanting. So that's why they say, hear what you chant, chant and hear what you chant. So Pravishtra Karna Randrena, right? As we hear, Krishna will enter through our ears and go into the heart. So it's very important. Even one name of Krishna is so potent, but we are chanting for a long time. If we are not able to get the benefit, which means somewhere we have to work on and then try to improve ourselves. It's okay. We have been in this material world for a long time. So we have so many agitations. We have so many wishes. But now that we come to an understanding that this is the best method and this is the essential things for the human purpose, then why not we take much more care and attention, right? So that's what the senior devotees suggest. Just focus. And he should be devoid of fear, completely free. So he should live a celebrate life. So this asana, we can easily relate to the how the sadhaka is going to perform his daily sadhana. He can easily relate. Okay. And pranayama, practice stopping the movement of outgoing breath into incoming and incoming breath to outgoing, and that thus at last remain in trance. So what is it? We have heard about this pranayama even in other yoga session, right? Because they say human life span is not calculated by the number of days or number of days he lives. Now, how many birthdays I celebrate. It is based upon how many breaths one person take. So it is actually calculated on that. That's why the pranayama is focusing on a breath. They try to have a longer, they try to take time to inhale. It's not like they don't just gasp. They take long time. That is how they practice this. Slowly they practice. And why do they Ashtanga Yogi want to extend their life? Because, say for example, if I'm if with the way I am breathing, if I can live for only, even so, say for example, 100 years, okay? But within the 100 years, it is very impossible for me to perfect this type of yogic practice so that I can turn inward and then focusing on the Lord. Okay, that lifespan is not sufficient. So through this pranayama, they try to extend their lifespan so that they have in this life itself, they wanted to achieve the goal. What is? They want to understand the Brahman or merge, whatever their goal is. So that's why they focus more on pranayama. But for us, we devotionally, when sadhaka try to do, we only focus on Maha Mantra. So that is also the focus point. And Pratyahara. These four are the Yoga Ruda stage. So where one turns internally. Cessation of material existence. So when we are sitting in a secluded place, when this yogi is sitting in a secluded place and he was able to control his senses, then he will be able to any material existence. So he is not bound to do any his prescribed duties. Like say for example, if he is a Brahmana, he is not any way bound to do his Brahmanic duties like Patan, Yajan. Because now he has gone beyond it. Now he has found something more important to do in his life, to turn inward and then focusing on the Lord. And dharana disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of material desire. He is said to have attained yoga. So once he gets into the stage, so he will discipline his mental activities also. So slowly, so first he's trying to control the external things, and then he turned inwards, and he wants to control the mental activities so that the mind is at peace. If the mind is agitating, then it is very hard for anybody to focus. So now he's turning inwards. And then what does he do? Dhyana. A lamp in a windless place does not waver. So the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in the meditation on the transcendent self. So he start meditation, dhyana. Like we have heard this word even in regular colloquial thing, material life, right? Dhyana. So he will start doing meditation. Once he start doing, then he reach samadhi. One is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. Okay, so he reached the samadhi where he will be able to realize the Lord. I forgot to add one thing. Even when he is in asana itself, so say for example, even an Ashtanga yogi, when he is practicing asana itself, what does the Lord says? One should meditate upon me. Okay, that should be the focus of meditation. Who is the focus? Even after situating in that position, the yogi should meditate on the Supreme Lord. The Lord did not say something else. Okay, so but through this practice of devotional service, we are already focusing on Krishna. Okay, there is no external needs. And anytime, say for example, any yogic practice, always the focus of meditation, always the focus should be to please the Lord. Okay, only then that process will fructify. For other things, it will not fructify. If it is something else, then they will not be able to get their desired goals. Okay, so these are all the 8 limbs. What is Yama, Niyama, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. So this is the Ashtanga Yoga. And what does it say? All other yogas are progression towards the destination of Bhakti Yoga. Once Ashtanga Yogi, okay, he is able to perfect, then he will be able to soon, see, now he has reached Samadhi. And then once he reached Samadhi, over a period of time, he will be able to realize the Bhagavan aspect. So that's how his next destination should be. If is not, then he will be still not reach the final goal. So that's how this yoga ladder, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. There is no possibility of once becoming a yogi, Arjuna, if he eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. So Krishna here is saying it's very important the way we eat, how do we control the tongue? It should be neither too much nor too little. Similarly, a person who is sleeping too much, then he is in tamas. Who does not sleep at all, his mind will be restless. Even one night, if we have a less number of sleep hours, right, we might feel that disturbances when we try to carry out our day. Say every day I sleep for 6 hours. Even if there is something less, is then that definitely it will have an impact, because it's also proven scientifically that only when we sleep, okay, when the mind is put to rest, or it is like they give an analogy. Say for example, we are going to a textile shop. What does we do? We try to see, okay, show me this garment, show me that, show me this, show me this. So the salesperson will try to pull all the garments and he will put it out. Okay, and when all the customers have left, what will he do? He will rearrange, he will fold or do anything and then put it back to the shelf, right? That is what happens with the mind also. During the day, so many thoughts comes up, so many agitations comes up. It just keep pouring from all directions. And when we sleep in the night, just like the salesperson thinks what is good, what is not good, where to put, where to not to put, and put it back to the shelf. Similarly, the mind, it will analyze all these thoughts and then put it back. If it is not important, then it will put it in the trash. If it is something that important, we want to recollect sometime later in the future, then it will put it in some repository. So that's what the mind does. So it is very important that one person takes prescribed number of sleep hours. It's been proven scientifically. But when we go to the Shastras, Lord has already explained, but we are so tuned in such a way that only if it is proven scientifically, only if it is someone great personality has told, we will understand. We should also understand that nobody is greater than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we should also take Shastras also into consideration and understand that it's very important that we practice it. And it is very important, not only for an Ashtanga Yogi, even a Bhakti Yogi can relate to this. So that's why first 6 chapters are very essential, how a sadhana bhakta can lead, sadhaka can lead. is sadhana. One should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith, not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation and thus control the senses on all sides of the mind. So sense control is very important. Like we saw in chapter 2, if you all remember that picture where the 5 horses is being driven by the charioteers, right? Always try to relate. Control senses means we have to control the horses. And who has to control it? It just soul has to control. How can the soul control? Only if the intelligence is equipped. We don't want to equip the reins, which is the mind. The mind should not control, only the intelligence. The charioteer should control. Okay. So that's how we have to gain, see how we can gain intelligence. And how can we gain intelligence? Anybody?
Through getting proper knowledge in Krishna consciousness, Netaji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah, only by reading scriptures we will be able to get the intelligence. So even if we are going to a new country, we can't just go just like that, right? We will do some analysis, try to get the knowledge, and then when we go, right? Similarly, all these scriptures are meant for human being to gain the knowledge. These scriptures are not for cats and dogs, not for animals. We can't expect animals to learn all these things. But as a human being, this is all like the manual. There are then that's why Srila Prabhupada prescribed these basic books like Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, these basic books. Because if we read this, we will be able to understand. We don't have a long lifespan to go and read all the Upanishads, all Puranas, and then all the Vedic things, and then come to a conclusion. Everything, the conclusion is already given here. So an intelligent person, even though if he's not intelligent, that's what the senior devotees say, even if you're not intelligent, if you see that some person who is following it is showing the behavior of intelligence, at least you should open up and then see, okay, I am not intelligent enough to do that, but I know that person is intelligent and he is following it. Let me at least try to practice. So that's what they said. Let us, now that we have got this human form of life, let us try to progress little further. Let us not degrade. So gradually, step by step, one should become situated in trance by means of intelligence sustained by full conviction, and thus mind should be fixed on self alone and should think nothing else. So mind control. So once the senses are controlled, you will be able to control the mind. From wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature, one must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of self. So wherever the mind is like a monkey mind. It will jump here and there, here. It will, one time it will say, okay, I want to eat rasgulla. Next time it will say, now I want to watch. Then it will say, oh, that person shouldn't have done this charu, that you should go and fight with this person. Mind will keep bombarding with so many thoughts and so many instructions. But through the intelligence, we should try to negate, we should try to separate, okay, at this moment, what I should do. This happens even when we are trying to do our chanting. When we are trying to do the chanting, so many thoughts will come up. At that time, it's very important. I mean, it is really difficult. I'm not sure where you are all, if you are able to control. Hari Bol, thank you so much. But I find struggles. At that time, senior devotees have advised this. Okay, mind will go, it will wander, because that is a monkey mind, it will wander. But what is my role in it? I have to pull it back. Say for now, one of the senior devotee was suggesting, say, I don't, I'm chanting only one round, okay? I don't have to fully focus. Yes, that is my wish. And then what is that is what I'm praying for. Like all 108 Maha Mantra, I will focus. That I really want. But my mind is so culprit, it is not able to do. So what will I do? I will trick the mind. How can we trick the mind? Okay, no, don't worry, we are not going to focus on 108. Just focus on this 5, okay? Just this 5. Okay, mind will say, okay, just this 5, right? Okay, let me focus 5 times. And then, and then give it a gap. Okay, now you're focused. Now next 5. And sometimes it might wander and then come back. Okay, just this 5. So at least even one Maha Mantra, if we chant, that is more beneficial rather than not focusing for the entire 108. Even if we are able to chant 5 Maha Mantra, that is a success. Over a period of time, this will increase from 5. Say, for example, after 2-3 months, then I might say, okay, from now on, focus on 10. And then slowly progress. So that's how the sadhaka will try to progress. It's not that overnight one can focus, because we have been in this material world with so many thoughts. Okay, sometimes we don't know why we are acting, because that is from the past impression. Maybe in previous life I was like that, more arrogant, more thick. I was like that. So it's all there. Okay, and slowly it is coming out. Why it is coming out? Cheto darpana marjanam. Mahaprabhu said, what through this process of chanting, we are cleansing our heart. So when we cleanse, say when we are cleaning the room, all the dirt first comes out, right? So these are all the dirt that is coming out. So once the dirt comes out, then it will look clean. So now this is the process of cleansing. Definitely all thoughts, many thoughts will come up, but a sadhaka should put back. He should come back and then try to focus on the mantra again. The yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reaction to the past. So once he does this, then he will soon be freed from the reaction to the past, because his focus point is Supreme Lord. Thus, self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. So once he does that, when he is in samadhi, then this yogi will be able to attain the perfection. Similarly, a sadhaka, once he practices it, then he will be able to perfect. And once he is perfect, then he will also be trans. It is liberation does not mean that leaving this material world and then going out and somewhere. Even when we are situated in this material world, acharyas and senior devotees say, even when we are in this material world, a person can be liberated. How? If all his thoughts and actions are only towards pleasing the Supreme Lord. When he understands the concept that he is a servant of the Supreme Lord, when he does this, then he is already liberated. We don't have to externally give up this body and then do. We always try to use this body to the service of the Lord. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. So that's a true yogi. So once he is able to perfect, when he is situated in transcendence, then a true yogi, right? So that's why Guru Maharaj are so merciful. We have done Guru Maharaj, like 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna has explained to Uddhava, like, Guru is no different from me. So everybody should accept the words of the Guru, right? Because they have perfected their life, and by following their instruction, then we will also be able to perfect. Then why Guru Maharaj is so merciful? Because he is already seeing, though we have so many contaminations, so many anarthas, right? But Guru Maharaj will see only the best part of us, and then see how to get this individual, this soul back to Krishna. That will only be the focus of all these great Vaishnavas. So a true yogi observes me in all and also sees me, sees every being in me. So it is very true, like they are situated in it. We should understand where they are and try to act accordingly. For one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. So the perfect example I can think of is Srila Prabhupada. Okay, Srila Prabhupada met his Guru Maharaj not more than more than 7 times. Okay, so but still he was carrying out the instruction in his heart. Only after he got the instruction to print the books and then preach to the Western world in the early age itself. But it took 40 years for Srila Prabhupada to carry out that instruction. It was never a time that Srila Prabhupada has forgot the Guru Maharaj. He was always carrying his Guru Maharaj in his heart. And later, he has started establishing many temples when the preaching, when the Krishna conscious movement was flourishing, right? And devotees asked Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, are you missing your Guru Maharaj? He said, no, I am not, because I am in constantly thinking of him. He is constantly blessing. If you read, there is a one time, if you all have an opportunity, please try to read Leelamrit. It is there in the Veda base, okay? It will be so empowering. And Leelamrit is not just a biography of Srila Prabhupada. If we read it, then it will definitely enhance us to get closer to Krishna. So that is how it is also an equivalent to scripture, because we can see how Prabhupada has dedicated his life, and through that actions, like what they say, practice what you preach, right? So Prabhupada literally practiced every time. For in one of the chapter, Srila Prabhupada was requesting everybody to print the Chaitanya Charitamrita book, and it was like very difficult, okay, because Prabhupada gave just 2 months time, and he said you have to print the complete volume. It has to go out within the certain time. So the devotees were working in shifts day and night, and there were only not many devotees during that time, right? So they were working together, and finally they were able to meet the deadline. And then you know what Srila Prabhupada said? Once he got the book in his hand, Srila Prabhupada said, my Guru Maharaj will be very happy. He never took credit to himself. He never thought, okay, he accomplished something. Even if I were that person, I would have think it's all me. I did it. But you see the difference. Like through the every words of Prabhupada, we can see that he always has Guru in his thoughts. He never accounted anything. Even though he built so many temples, he built so many, even the food for life, he got in so many things. But he never took credit of himself. Anytime he will be downtrodden, and he is ready to sit in the ground and then eat. And he is ready to do anything. So that's what I could think of. Like for one who sees in me, sees in me, I'm never lost, nor he's. So they always have Krishna at their center. And then when they asked who wrote this, why, Prabhupada said, okay, bring that Bhagavad Gita book and then read it to me. The disciple asked, Prabhupada, it was you who wrote it. No, it was not me. It was Krishna. He dictated and then I wrote. He never took credit because they always have Krishna in their heart. Okay, so they will be only able to see the Lord. They will just overcome all this external things, and that's why the Guru Maharaj, all the great disciples, okay, senior disciples, they don't look into our anarthas. They will only see Krishna, and then they will see how they can connect the individual soul to Krishna. Such a yogi who engages in worshipful service of the super soul, knowing that I and the super soul are one, remains always in me in all circumstances. So for that person will remains in me. So that's why they are always at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. So that's why anything that comes out from the great disciples, senior disciples, or the Guru Maharaj, right? So it's no different. The words are no different from the Supreme. He is like, they are in one of the lectures, disciples were saying that Guru Maharaj is just Paramatma incarnation in an external world. So if we want to see how the Paramatma looks, he is just an incarnation. We can see through the Guru Maharaj. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and their distress, O Arjuna. So they are so compassionate, whatever it might be. Always they will try to see is, how can I connect this soul back to Krishna? So a perfect yogi is like that. And if well, now we are reading about Ashtanga Yogi, right? Once he is in Samadhi, then he will be in composed position. When he is not agitated, when he is composed, he will be able to think straight and then see all this. He will be able to see the equality. Okay. Just one more instance. Sorry. Just one more incident. Just want to share from Prabhupada Leelamrit. Okay. There were something when the temples were built, and there was a scenario, okay, where some grihasthas were asked to live in the temple. Some grihasthas who are having a large family, there were some confusion as to decide on who can stay in the temple and who can't stay in the temple. And so everybody went forward and then put this word to Srila Prabhupada. They said, okay, temple means we have some certain rules and regulations. These kinds of people cannot live in the temple. So Prabhupada, we have decided that we are going to announce that these people have to leave the temple, and then they can take a residence somewhere out. Prabhupada listened to entire conversation, both pros and cons completely. And then they said, asked Prabhupada, what is your verdict on it? Prabhupada said, you know what? I really understand what you are trying to establish through this verdict. But my only concern is if I send them out, then they will not have chance to associate with the devotees. Then they will not be able to make this life perfect. They have got this life. I don't want to be the reason for driving them out. So it was at that time when I read it, it was like so compassionate. Even and establishing so many temples, even after reaching so many heights, he was in weeks. Okay, any time in his life situation, he was always thinking about only the people, how he can save, how he can get back to Krishna. So that's what he says. He sees true equality in all beings. He does not see whether they are qualified or unqualified. Srimad Bhagavatam also says, for bhakti, there is no ahaituki apratihata. There is no material qualification or material disqualification to take up bhakti. Anybody can take up bhakti as long as he is having the enough sukruti. Like we discussed what the sukruti is all about in another class. As long he will be automatically able to take this bhakti. So Prabhupada was always having this consciousness. So a true yogi will have this consciousness. Maybe a real material mundane person will see, okay, will he benefit or he not benefit? We have all this comparison, but a true yogi will see only equality. And now we are going to the next section where Arjuna is going to ask some doubts. Okay, Arjuna. What is it? Okay, Arjuna is going to say, Krishna, this is because now Krishna is trying to explain the Ashtanga yogic practice, right? He has to sit in a secluded place, focus his mind, sit erect, and then control his senses, and then sit on a deer skin and do so many things, activities he has explained, and then revert. There are 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga, right? So Arjuna is going to say, you know what, Krishna, the process which you explained is totally difficult. I don't think it is even possible because my mind is restless. I can't even focus. How do you expect me to do it? How do you expect us to do it? So just like the way we are in a situation, right? So we are telling, I'm not able to focus in my chanting. You are telling me sit in one place, don't do this, don't even, if any thought comes, come back and then start focusing on Mahamantra. So something similar to the sadhaka's position. We are having troubles every day to focus. So Arjuna is asking a similar doubt. And who is Arjuna? Arjuna is a person who is well versed in his archery skill, and he was able to look into the water and then shoot the fish for his Swayamvara. And he got all benedictions. Okay, Arjuna is, and then they had to go for this 13-year Vanavas. They were staying in the forest. It's not that Arjuna was always leading a royal life, and now when Krishna said you have to go to the forest and then do all these activities, Arjuna is not afraid of going to the forest. They have already been there. They have most of the lifetime, more than they stayed in the palace, even though they are the prince, more than the amount of time they stayed in the palace and enjoyed this royal opulence is less when compared to the amount of time they were suffering, when they were being troubled, when they were in the forest, when they had to undergo so many things. And they also went through tapas, right? Austerity, because just before the Mahabharata war started, everybody, they all went for an austerity to get please the demigods, and they also got some boons and some astras. They got so many weapons, right? So it is not very new to them. But that Arjuna is asking, oh Krishna, chanchala hi mana Krishna. What is he saying? Arjuna is saying, it is very difficult for me, Krishna. So that's what says, Madhusudana's system of yoga, which you have summarized, appears impractical and unendurable for me. For the mind is restless and unsteady. So you know what? My mind is unsteady and restless, and you are asking me to do this? So Arjuna is saying, Chanchala hi mana Krishna pramati balavatridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayo rivasu dushkaram. So what does that mean? For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate and very strong, oh Krishna, and to subdue it, I think it is more difficult than controlling the wind. That Krishna, that Arjuna, who was able to control everything and he was able to focus his mind, that Arjuna is saying it is very difficult to control. So where are we to even compare that I will be able to perfect my life just by chanting, right? So Arjuna is asking the question in favor of us. But Krishna, the mind is more difficult to control than the wind. That's what he's saying. Even you can control the wind, but the mind, it travels faster. You can think so many billion things, and it can, even if I'm situated in one place, I can think of somewhere else. If 7 seas across, like if some person is there, I'll be able to think about it and then dream upon it. So Arjuna is saying it is very difficult, Krishna. It is not highly impossible. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, what is Krishna going to respond? Asamshayam Mahabaho, Manodur Nigraham Chalam, Abhyasena tu yuktena, Vairagyena cha grihyate. So what is Krishna saying? Abhyasa. So through practice and Vairagya, determination. Yes, Asamshayam Mahabaho. Yes, Arjuna, I totally agree. This is not easy. It is difficult, but you can control the mind. How? Abhyasena. Abhyasena means to practice, and Vairagya through determination. So if we have to do any tough job, I just can't do just like that, right? Even if I have to say, for example, carry a heavy lifting, or if I have to lift anything heavy, something heavy, I have to put a focus. I will try to do it with determination. Yes, I can do it. Determination is the key. Even in regular material life, we have heard this proverb, right? Where there is a will, there is a way. So if you desire to do it, then you can do it. If you don't desire, then however easy it is, you won't be able to do it. So that is what it is. So Krishna is saying, oh mighty arm son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by a suitable practice and by detachment. Okay. The senses can be controlled by right practice and detachment. So how can the senses? So that is what it is. Acharya says that's how for a sadhaka, how can we relate to a sadhaka? He will be able to do it through constant practice of this devotional service. That's why sadhana bhakti is the key. We don't have love for Krishna. And then think about how can we even think about these great devotees who were literally crying and then earning for Krishna's association. Only if we have love, then we can miss someone, right? First of all, we don't have love. So even to get to there, that's why sadhana bhakti is very important. Why the sadhana bhakti? Where we try to practice regulated devotional service. We try to follow the rules and regulations. These are all our yama and niyama. Okay, what to do, what not to do. That we will be reading in level 3. What is it, how to do, how not to do. But just trying to let you know, these are all the steps that will help us to develop detachment. Like on the other day, I was showing up a Bhagavatam verse, right? And we practice bhakti, automatically the renunciation, the devotion, and the detachment, and everything will come up, just like the way we eat a morsel of food. Okay, if we eat a morsel of food, we get the taste, we get nutrition. At the same time, our hunger gets satiated. Similarly, once we take up this process, automatically the three things will occur. We don't have to externally do anything to get into detachment. Automatically will happen. For one whose mind is unriddled, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled, who strives by appropriate means, is assured of success. Trying to practice yoga while engaging the mind in material enjoyment is like trying to ignite a fire while pouring water on it. Similarly, a yoga practice without mental control is waste of time. So what is this deeper meaning of it? It is very important we control the mind. So how does a mind control happen? Only mind control can happen only through sadhana. Okay, sadhana is very important. That's why we have to say, if we have committed, yes, I will do this activity. Say if I do one round of chanting, right? If I'm committing, then I have to put a full focus. Even if I'm not able to put a full focus, even if I'm not able to put full focus on it, I will at least attempt. Today I will attempt. It's not working. Tomorrow I will attempt. Keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. That's what we have also heard saying, right? Winner is not counted by how many times he win, like how many times he raise, right? So it's very important how many times we raise ourselves and then keep doing. So it's very important we put mind in the control. What is that? Now Krishna is going to talk about destination of unsuccessful yogi. Say, for example, a yogi started this Ashtanga yoga process, or even somebody has started the Bhakti yoga practice. What if he's not able to perfect in the same life? What is it going to happen? So Krishna is saying unsuccessful transcendentalists obtain two things. Either in their next birth, they will get into a heavenly enjoyment. Say, for example, they just started and they are not even halfway through. They have just started, but still they know this process is good, but they are not able to complete, right? Then they will get into a heavenly planets. But they are there, they are progressed, but not perfected. At that time, what will happen? Then they will take a birth in an aristocratic family if they are slightly advanced, or a birth in the family of wise transcendentalists that bring them immediate further training. Say for a Bhakti Yoga, right? He has followed these process, but for some reason he have not attained the Bhava and Prema. What will happen? Krishna is saying for that person, Krishna will align the next birth in such a way that he takes birth in a Vaishnava family where he does not have to start from the scratch. From wherever he has left, he will be able to take it up and then progress further. It's very important why Vaishnava family is specified, right? If it is a different family, then we have to take time in convincing the parents, the society, or the relatives that this is the good process. At least for that time, half a lifespan will be over, and then we have to perfect it, and then we have to improve. So if we are in such a family who is already following, right from the birth, they will be hearing only Maha Mantra, and along with they gave in the Prabhupada would have given example of himself and also his guru. Okay, because they all took up birth in Vaishnava family. So right from the young age, Prabhupada was involved in this Yatra festival. He was involved in making the cart. So it was always there since his birth. So he does not have to go and learn the art somewhere. It was imbibed through his upbringing. So that's what Krishna is going to tell. So what is the destination? Although he begins the process of self-realization with faith, he later desists due to the worldly mindedness and does that not attain. So Arjuna is asking, what happens to this transcendentalist? So this is the question Arjuna is asking. What happens? But he is not able to perfect. He does such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence, fall away from both spiritual and material success, and perish like a raven cloud with no position in any sphere. So Arjuna is giving an analogy. Oh, you mean to say, this is the Arjuna's question, which he is putting forward. Okay, say if he is started, now that he has left us the material world also. But now in quest of spiritual knowledge and then spiritual bliss, he has relinquished the material things also. But now he has not perfected this process. So what is the destination of that yogi Krishna? So will he perish like a raven cloud? Raven cloud is, say, there are some clouds in the sky, right? Some clouds, if it merges with the big cloud, then it will remain. But if it is a small cloud, what will happen if there is a heavy wind? Then they all disperse and scatter, and after some point of time we will not be able to see this scattered clouds at all anywhere. It will not be, so it will just disappear through the heat, and it will just disappear. So Arjuna is asking, will they just perish like that? This is my doubt, Krishna. I ask you to dispel completely, but for you, no one is found who can destroy this doubt. So Arjuna is asking this question to Krishna. Krishna responds saying, पार्थनैवेह नामृत विनाशस्तस्य विद्यते न हि कल्याणकृत् कश्चित् दुर्गतिं तात गच्छति. So Krishna is saying the transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activity does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, will never become overcome by evil. Okay, so this is the verse which we saw in chapter 2. Neha vikrama nashosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpamabhyasya dharmasya trayate mahatopayat. So even if you take this process, even if you leave it alone, Krishna is promising there is no destruction, there is no loss, there is no loss or diminution, because there will be definitely some benefit. And what is that benefit? Pious birth into good family, revives the divine consciousness early stage, naturally attracted to the yogic principles. Okay, so this is what we discussed. Like naturally they will get attracted. The unsuccessful yogi, after many years of enjoyment on the planet of pious living activities, is born into a family of righteous people or into a family of rich aristocracy. Or after a long practice of yoga, he takes birth in a family of transcendentalists who are surely great in wisdom. Certainly, such a birth is rare in this world. Krishna also saying, on taking such a birth, he revives the divine consciousness of his previous life, and he again strives to make further progress in order to achieve the complete success. O son of Kuru. So Krishna is promising this is what will happen for an unsuccessful yogi. By virtue of divine consciousness of his previous life, he automatically becomes attract to the yogic principle even without seeking them. Such an inquisitive transcendentalist stands always above the ritualistic principles of scriptures. Okay, so he will always stand apart. So when the yogi engages himself with sincere endeavor in making further progress, it's not that, okay, now after next life he has taken a birth in a good family, he just can't be leisure and then he can't think that, okay, automatically things will happen. No, he has to make a sincere endeavor. From that point, he has to put endeavor and then keep moving forward. Okay. Being washed of all contamination, then ultimately achieving perfection after many births of practice, he attains the supreme goal. And he has to put endeavor, he has to put the focus, and he has to work to make it better. And don't take things lightly. Only such person will be able to attain the supreme goal. So who is the topmost yogi? Now, this is the final section. Yogis are greater than imperialists, fruitive workers, and ascetics. Of all yogis, those who with full faith always think of Krishna and render transcendental loving service to him are the highest of all. Now, Krishna spoke about this yogi who is doing all these activities, right? Ashtanga Yoga and all these activities. Now, Krishna is going to conclude chapter 6, which is going to be the link for the subsequent chapters. So we have seen that first the Bhagavad Gita is split into 3 sections, right? First is Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and then Jnana Yoga, right? So this verse is going to be the link verse when we start analyzing chapter 7 to chapter 12, which is going to talk about Bhakti Yoga. It's going to be very interesting. I would request all the devotees to join us to learn more. Why we say, we have heard, until now we were giving analogies and then giving comparisons, right? Why the acharyas, why Sri Krishna thinks that Bhakti Yoga is the best. So that we are going to see going forward. A yogi is greater than an ascetic who is doing the meditation. Okay, greater than the empirist and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. Okay, yoginam api sarvesham madgatenantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yomam same yuktata momataha. This is the link verse. And of all yogi, first he said a yogi is greater, so become a yogi. What kind of yogi? You want to be a karma yogi, jnana yogi, ashtanga yogi? No, Krishna is saying the yogi, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself and render transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and he is highest of all. That is my opinion. So this is the first time in the first 6 chapters, Krishna is talking about think of me, remember me, render transcendental love and service to me. So what is this all about? Bhakti Yoga. So this is the first time Krishna is stressing on Bhakti Yoga. So he says yogi is better, but what yogi, what type of yogi he is referring to? A Bhakti Yoga who does a devotional service. Okay, and who is intimately united with me in yoga. He is the highest of all, and that is the opinion. We are going to see in the subsequent chapters how this Bhakti Yoga is considered the highest of all and why. Okay, and what are all the benefits. Okay, that we are going to see. So these are all the sections we saw in chapter 6. So first is we saw about advancing in yoga through detached work. Then we saw yoga ruda stage, that giving the work, further stages in yoga, necessity of controlling the turbulent mind, destination of an unsuccessful yogi, and a topmost yogi. Who is the topmost yogi? A yogi who rendered transcendental loving services to Supreme Lord, who always thinks of me. Here it clearly states me, right? So Krishna clearly saying me as a personal form, not through some other jyoti or some other light or anything. So he clearly says focus on the Supreme Lord as a personal form. Only Bhakti Yoga is the one where devotee focuses on the personal form of the Supreme Lord. So with this, we conclude chapter 6. And thank you all for your association. Now we can open up the forum for any questions or clarifications. No questions, no clarifications?